Welcome back, everyone, to Vox Markets. My name is Paul Hill. I'm delighted again to be able to speak to Adam Hill, CEO of Oncimmune, a leading immunodiagnostics firm with a world-class expertise in autoantibodies. So welcome, Adam.
Thanks very much, Paul, and thanks for getting me in just before the festivities start.
Yeah, well, big congrats as well on the recent £2.1 million fundraise and series of new business wins. In fact, I think when we last spoke, I did probe you about what the priorities were, and this was only back in October. You said contracts, and certainly that seems to have been the case. Maybe we can start there. What's sort of like been driving the recent or the demand pickup over the last sort of 6 to 9 months, along with all the new orders?
Well, we've seen, of course, the development of this business over the last 3 years, right? I mean, in the first year of re-establishing the pipeline, having acquired Protein Diagnostics, we did 3 contracts. One was quite sizable, but nonetheless, it was 3. The second year, 9. Third year, 18 contracts, and we're certainly gunning substantially more than that this year. And why have we been able to build traction? Well, a number of reasons. Firstly, of course, we did that very successful oversubscribed fundraise in March last year, which allowed us to not just invest in the capacity within our Dortmund facility, but also building a specialist and focused business development team based out of Boston in the US, which has helped build the pipeline tremendously, number one. Number two, it is far more difficult to sell the first contract than it is the second, third, and fourth contract. Pharma companies buy data at the end of the day, and once you've been able to demonstrate that data has utility and it's quality data to them, they're very keen to understand how else you might be able to help. And so there is a meaningful amount of repeat business now within our pipeline. And number three, that tends to manifest itself as a master service agreement. And we've spoken about this a little bit, but I think just worth saying a couple of seconds on
yeah,
on
would
this.
do, yeah.
It's key to understand that gaining access and delivering your first contract is important. It's akin to a foot in the door, but it certainly doesn't mean you are a valued and maybe preferred supplier of services to a pharmaceutical company. That is some way off. Not only do you need to deliver a quality outcome the first time round, but the second, third, and fourth time round, you have to open yourself up and be ready to be audited. And it's not just your technology, but your data management systems, processes, your people, your financial credibility, all is scrutinized by partners. And then, of course, you need to find the work internally. The master service agreement, of course, is simply a framework which articulates the way in which we will work together and maybe the economics, but it doesn't articulate the specifics of an individual project. But a master service agreement is absolutely key, and we have a number of those now with some really valued customers. So I think all in all, momentum is building. If I was to look at the pipeline today, I suspect 50 to 60% of this year's business will be repeat.
Wow, that must be giving you really good visibility, I suppose.
It's starting to give us some really good visibility, and it's starting to allow us to forecast a little better. One thing's absolutely for sure, that our ability to forecast is very dependent upon the health of our pipeline. Like a lot of service businesses, having both depth and breadth to that pipeline gives you optionality. Not everything arrives when you anticipate or forecast it's going to arrive, and our pipeline is really developing very nicely. It's probably building at somewhere between 700,000 and 800,000 euros a month in gross contract value. By the back end of this financial year, I suspect will be sort of 17, 18, 19, maybe 20 million of gross contract value sat in the pipeline. And of course, that continues to manifest itself as contracts that we talked about the other day.
Yeah, and what would be the scope of a master services agreement in terms of the type of work that you could do? Because in like this week, you mentioned a couple of specifics, and we'll go on to that in a moment in terms of the contract. But just in a master service, what is in there? Is it drug discovery? Is it patient trial data? How big and how general is it?
I mean, the first thing to say is that all of our customers come to us with something quite different. And in
Mm.
fact, customers come to us with a range of different projects from different groups within their organizations. So no one project is the same. That having been said, there are some things that people tend to think we're increasingly world experts in. And one of those is in profiling and predicting the chance of immune-related adverse events as a result of patients with cancer or autoimmune disease or an infectious disease being treated with a drug that moderates their immune system in one way, shape, or form. And of course, I've described this the other day as like the reason often that people are developing a particular cancer or have an autoimmune disease is because there's a chink in their armor. There's a chink in that very, very sophisticated immune response that we've all developed throughout our entire life, from the first days on this earth to now, with all of the exposure to bugs and viruses and pandemics and everything else, evolving that immune response. But often there's a chink which has allowed the disease to take hold. And these drugs, in some way, add a missing piece to the jigsaw back to the immune system. But in doing so, they create a ripple effect across that immune system that can ultimately have undesirable consequences. And so we're in the business of really profiling what the disease does to the immune system and what drugs do to the immune system. I think it's important to say, though, from a business perspective, that what we tend to try and focus on is clinical development, not preclinical development. And for your listeners, Paul, the difference really is in preclinical, the design hasn't been frozen. The drug is still in development, whether that's in a test tube, a petri dish, or maybe an animal model. It hasn't been frozen. It hasn't been introduced to a human being. In clinical development, you're really looking to not just determine the dose of the drug, which is now a fixed asset, that achieves the desirable effect, but also expand that drug across a larger and increasingly large group of people. Determine its safety. So we focus on the clinical piece, and that's important because, of course, it means that the barrier to entry is much higher than in the preclinical space, as we receive patient data when we're analyzing this data to help us make really informed decisions and provide appropriate feedback to our customers.
And then with just sort of like dive into that a bit, we've got the new technologies are coming in, and I know there's been a lot of news wires in terms of the Moderna. I think it's that they've done with Keytruda, Merck's Keytruda, I think it is. And basically they've put mRNA technology, which I'm sure investors will remember from the vaccines, but they've put a vaccine layer on top of what Keytruda is doing as an immuno. But the broad picture is that we seem to be the technology seems to be going more towards changing someone's immune system or changing the reaction they get to putting a drug in. That presumably sort of moves more towards Oncimmune's expertise here, because the auto responses and the immune responses are becoming central to how how effective that drug is and safe.
That's right. And if you look back over the history of drug development, we started years ago with the development of small molecules targeting particular pathways, cellular pathways, that evolved maybe 20 years ago into this new field of biologics, which people will maybe associate with monoclonal antibodies. The big success in this space is a British success story, Humira, that was developed by Cambridge Antibody Technologies. But that world has evolved really, really fast over the last 20 years. And so what you find now is that not only are those biologics becoming ever more complex, and the fields of gene and cell therapy are a good example of this, where scientists are looking to engineer the therapy or the cell to create a curative response in a patient. But equally, you're finding that there are different types of biologic approaches which are being used in combination. And the example you used of Moderna's mRNA vaccine being used with Keytruda's Merck's Keytruda, which is a checkpoint inhibitor, is a good example of this. And of course, we simply don't know how your immune system is going to respond. So you're absolutely right. I think the future is really bright for companies like ours that are expert in following the immune response.
Yeah, and I'm guessing, given you put so much investment into your Dortmund facility, they're pretty busy over Christmas, I guess, too. Quite a few blood samples, or maybe not over Christmas and New Year, but with this pipeline building, they must have quite a lot of sort of good sample work to do.
Yeah, they do actually, and I was only on a call on Friday with our two senior leaders in Dortmund, trying to find time when they can take holiday over the Christmas period. They booked 2 weeks, but that they're really struggling to squeeze those 2 weeks in. But we will manage. We'll manage.
Yeah, good. Well, it's a nice position to be in. In terms of sort of like future investments, obviously, you did that the fundraise just recently, but the bigger one was obviously 18 months ago when you expanded capacity and put in the sales. Is there any other sort of like other investments you need? You did mention in the small sort of top-up funding you were going to do a biomarker development.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, there's always opportunities to invest in programs, and whether we do that off our own balance sheet or whether we do that in combination with others, and what the mix of contributions there are always bespoke to the particular scenario, and we're always very keen to explore those opportunities. Not only do they generate more data, they give us exposure to a space maybe we're not in previously. They maybe generate intellectual property that can be reused elsewhere. So they're really valuable opportunities for us as we continue to build out the platform, and we would love to do more of that. But equally, I think there's opportunities to bolt on other technologies to our platform. We clearly have some very strong relationships and advocates within the life science industry now in some very big and well-known pharmaceutical companies, and bringing them what they need in order to answer questions that they struggle to answer, I think is where we would like to see our future. We are not just a service provider, but ultimately a solutions provider to many of our partners. Yeah.
So we're putting all that together with a greater visibility, new orders coming in. I mean, it de-risks the sort of expectations, which I think, if I remember, is £7.5 million by the 12 months ending August 2023, I think it is, and about EBITDA break even. You must be getting reasonably good visibility of that now.
Yeah, absolutely. So in lieu of there being equity analysts
numbers
writing on us and numbers in the market, and we've as management put out numbers alongside the fundraise. And you're right, as we step each day throughout the year, we get greater visibility of that number. Certainly contracts throughout December have been more prolific than maybe at any other time during our ownership of this platform. And we hope that will certainly continue into the new year. You may remember we've spoken about the sort of the peaks and troughs in this business, and certainly the back end of the year as people are trying to spend what's left of the budget, and into the new year when new budgets are released are the times when pharma probably spends 80% with us. And so we had anticipated this, and as part of the raise, of course, whilst also looking to reduce or retire some of the debt that we had taken on into the business, we were keen just to provide a little bit more working capital as it can be a little bit challenging when you're trying to manage cash when a lot of business comes through the door all at the same time. But we're in a good shape as we go through the Christmas period and into the new year.
Yeah. Well, it must be a seminal moment, because if you're going to be hopefully EBITDA but neutral, sort of like for the year, and I did notice actually on your sort of cash expectations, you're going to be sort of like, you know, cash flow break even on an operating perspective for the year, as roughly anyway. So it's a really sort of pivotal year, isn't it? This one. Well, it should, and if you continue that growth rate that you mentioned in the last 2 years into 2024, that should be a really sort of a majorly breakthrough year for profitability.
I think so. Yes, absolutely. And, you know, with more manageable debt on the balance sheet, I think we're going to be able to go from strength to strength here. Of course, your viewers will appreciate that we're essentially running two subsidiaries under a top
Yes.
co. If you remove the top co, those two subsidiaries in their own right are both profitable businesses on a pro forma basis. And so I think it is a seminal year. There's a lot to be done still. We've got 8 months of our financial year left, but nonetheless, I think we're all quietly positive.
Well, you just led me perfectly there into the other division, EarlyCDT Lung, the early stage sort of like lung cancer test, which is actually seemed to making, it's EBITDA positive now, and is also making, you know, sort of good progress, I think, out in the States with the distributor Biodesics. In fact, I think it got Medicare approval, didn't it, at a much higher selling price just recently, and I think it's also won some good contracts with the NHS. Do you want to take us through how you see that in terms of, because you mentioned you've got strategic options there? That's
right. So look, we made the difficult decision in June of this year to right-size the cost base, and really that meant downscale the R&D spend on our EarlyCDT business. And, you know, overnight turn that into a profitable business. That's hand in hand with the fact that our major customer, 80% of our revenue in that business, has had some really excellent news over the last 6 months, including an agreement to sell into the Veteran Affairs Administration at a fixed price, Medicare reimbursement at 10 times the in-market selling price that we were previously getting as a value-based diagnostic, a relationship with Philips, which acts as a force multiplier for them, some fantastic publications at big cancer conferences in the last couple of months. And of course, you know, a substantial raise of both debt and equity into their business to continue to drive their sales and marketing machine, all has had a knock-on effect. It is a relationship whereby we shield ourselves from the vagaries of the market, but nonetheless benefit from their ability to sell volume of products into the market very, very substantially. So I think that is really now motoring, and it's going from strength to strength, and we will see with the same cost structure, I think increases in profitable revenue year upon year for the medium term, certainly from this business.
And so what are the strategic priorities? Is it, you mentioned a sort of potential IPO spin-off, or presumably if somebody came along and wanted to buy it and it was at the proper price, then that would be considered as well?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I think it is a business that returns cash to the balance sheet, and will continue to do so. And I think in that light, you know, we would take a hard look at any offer that came our way. Certainly not in the process of soliciting those at the moment. But we would certainly look at it and try and do the best thing for shareholders. It's, you know, the board's commitment to drive the growth of the ImmunoINSIGHTS business, and if it means that more management time can be spent on that, and that there's additional cash on the balance sheet to grow both organically and inorganically, it may be that we would decide to divest Limited. Equally, I think we want to bring a decision around the future of Limited to a conclusion within a timely manner, and hence we will also look at ways in which we can maybe spin off Limited as an IPO onto the standard list within the next 12 months.
Right. Well, you've certainly got a lot happening on your plate there, haven't you, for the next sort of like 2 or 3 years in terms of driving that sort of like really profitability in the ImmunoINSIGHTS and the separation maybe of the products business. So a bit nearer to the news flow of the next sort of three months. Say, is it going to be sort of like is there a trading update sometime in January, Feb, or is it really just? I won't put the words. You can tell me.
Absolutely. Look, trading update back in January, beginning of February, as we've got our results that are coming out. We will have our AGM at the same time, and of course, we will do a trading update at that time, and there will be more news that we're able to share with your audience and our shareholders in that period of time. I think to coin a phrase, I'd be looking for more contracts.
Good to hear it. Well, I hope you have a great Christmas, Adam. Hopefully you'll manage to put your feet up a bit. I'm sure that the guys in Dortmund will be working overtime, but we've got very good prospects for next year.
I hope so. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.